Okay, everyone. This is Drayton Bird. He's the man with the funny English accent. The gentleman with the American accent is Clayton Makepeace. The difference between, well, there are significant differences between Clayton and me, apart from the fact that our names rhyme. Clayton and Drayton. We're thinking of opening a third-class comedy show. The first difference is he makes a lot more money than me. And you may not know this if you're not writers, but there's an old story about writers, which is that whenever two writers meet each other, they always start talking about money. So that's one thing I'm going to talk about. The other characteristic, of course, is that Clayton is much, much younger than me. But then this applies to practically everybody in this business. Now, a lot of these recordings that people offer give you lots of good advice about how to do this and how to do that, what makes a good headline, what makes a bad headline, how to begin your copy, how to end your copy, where to put your money without having to pay any tax, and so on. If you want to know anything about all the legal aspects of these things, how to do this and how to do that, well, you really want to refer to Clayton, because as far as I can make out, he's just about the most successful person in the world today writing copy. And I'm going to ask one or two questions as to why this happy state of affairs has come about. But you should go to his website, and you'll find that he offers, I wouldn't say he just offers good advice, he offers a torrent of good advice. And that's how we met. I saw something on his website, I wrote to him, and so on. So I'm going to talk to Clayton, not just about the little things you have to do to get right. I'm much more interested in something else, actually, and I think you should be too. And that's the mind. The mind behind the man, and the man behind the mind. What kind of person does achieve so much? What goes on in their mind? What distinguishes them from other people? And I'm going to do this by asking Clayton lots and lots of simple questions, mostly fairly personal, none too embarrassing, I hope, and see what he says and see what we can learn. And I sent this list to him a little while ago, and he probably looked at it 3 minutes before he started this conversation and thought, oh my God. So the first thing I asked him was, what are the 10 things that you think matter most in success in the marketing business, Clayton?
Well, I'm not sure there are 10 for me, but as I was thinking about that question, Drayton, and by the way, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm not sure I make more money than you, but
oh, maybe.
But I came up with 5, and as I was making my list, I couldn't help but notice some real parallels here. The question that you said you were going to ask were 10 things that matter most, and I didn't know if you were talking about to me personally in my personal life or in business. Mm-hmm. So I began making a list of the 5 things in my personal life that I find of greatest value. Mm-hmm. The first one is self-respect, because it really starts with you. It starts with the individual, and being able to look at yourself in the mirror and be proud of who you are and be proud of what you stand for and what you've done. So I would have to list that as number 1. And number 2, of course, is family, and 3 is friends. 4th is curiosity, and this is a subject that you and I have chatted about several times in the last couple of weeks, and we'll have the opportunity to talk about that more in a little while. And then finally, although I'm not a particularly religious person, the emotional or spiritual side of life needs constant feeding just as much as all of these other areas. As I was going over that list, though, I started thinking about how those things apply to business. When you think about self-respect for a company, for an entrepreneur, or for a copywriter, it really comes down to having a product that you're proud of. You have to ask yourself, what does it take for me to go to sleep at night a happy camper and wake up in the morning excited about my day and feeling good about what I'm doing with the years that I've been given? And for a business person, it's the quality that you're bringing to your customers' lives. And so as an entrepreneur, that would be your products or the services you provide. If you're a copywriter, it's your copy. If you're a marketing consultant, it's the advice that you're giving to your clients. So feeling good about what you're doing is essential in business, and I think that's really number one. Number two in my personal life is family and the relationships that we have with our children, and, of course, that I have with the redhead who's a total maniac.
This is Clayton's wife.
Yeah.
Who quite clearly, I've gathered, during our relationship, runs everything.
Absolutely. She's a mixture of Irish and Blackfoot Indian, and so she's constantly on the warpath. So, but anyway, so family. But in a business, your family is, are your employees, and they really come next. The value of any company, primary value, really is the value of the talent on staff and the commitment of that staff to the corporate mission and vision. And so developing that family is absolutely, in the top when it comes to things that matter most in business. In my personal life, next comes friends, and in a company, that would be your customers, the people that you're doing business with on a daily basis. And again, I see business not so much as a way to make yourself rich, but rather the more classic sense of capitalism, which is bringing value to people's lives in a way that they're willing to pay for. And Bob King used to say that. He was president of Phillips Publishing over and over again, and that was our guiding criteria for creating products and for our marketing. So honoring your customers and using every contact, whether it's a sales contact or whatever kind of contact it is, to strengthen the bond between the company or the company spokesperson and the customer is absolutely essential. And the next thing I thought of was curiosity in my own personal life. Intellectual curiosity is really what keeps life fun and interesting. And but in your business life, curiosity really means asking the questions constantly, never being too so self-satisfied or arrogant that you feel that you already know it all. So, it's constant research. It's curiosity about the world at large. The technologies, the offers, the types of products that are being developed, and making the connection between those things and the products that you're promoting. It's researching your competitors and finding out what's working best for them in all of those areas. What's their messaging like? What's their pricing? What are they testing? In this wonderful direct mail business, direct response business, it's easy to know what your competitors are doing. You can look at the various mailing list catalogs, and you can see what their products are, what their pricing is, how many people they're adding to their mailing list, and so it's a great source of inspiration and ideas. And of course, as you were mentioning yesterday when we were chatting, Drayton, constantly researching your prospects, understanding what they're thinking, how they're feeling, what they're wanting, what they're buying, is essential. And of course, doing the same with your customers. And then finally, there's the emotional or spiritual side of life. In my personal life, I feed that really with two things. We'll talk about one of them later, which is one of my reading interests. But the other one really is music. I have very eclectic tastes in that area, and I just delight in all types of music. And I find that the time that I spend listening to music or playing music is time that is really preparing me for the week ahead. It's rejuvenating time. In business life, I think the comparison there would be the recognizing the emotional component in what we all do. There's when we approach a customer, so many of us will go to him and we'll say, well, okay, well, here's my widget, and here's what it does, and here are the benefits that it'll bring to your life. You know, it'll make you thinner or taller, or put hair on your head, or make you look younger, or make your lawn greener, make you richer or healthier or whatever. And we approach our products almost clinically sometimes. And we forget the fact that when we begin a conversation with a customer or a prospect, he's a bundle of emotion about this subject. He has feelings about other companies like yours, other products like yours, other products he's bought through this medium in the past. Whether, you know, maybe some of them were really great purchases, maybe some of them disappointed him. He has very strong resonant emotions regarding the problem that you're solving for him, or the desire that you're offering to fulfill for him. And he has an emotional attachment to his money. So ignoring those things, I think, is crazy. I mean, I talk quite often about the fact that all we really need as human beings is a cave, a fire, and a piece of meat. And so attempting to sell something on the basis of pure logic, or appealing only to the left side of the brain, when 99% of the things that we buy every day are bought to fulfill an emotional need, a desire for status, a desire for comfort, a desire for security, or some other very strong desire, when you ignore those things, it's like going to a gunfight and leaving 99% of your bullets in the car. So that isn't smart. And so those are my 5.
That's very interesting. But one's interesting to me because, like all human beings, I'm deeply interested in myself. And it so happens that I'm very interested in music, and 3 of my family are actually in the music industry.
Is that right?
Yeah, my daughter is quite successful, actually, and one of my sons makes a living and the other one doesn't. Hey! Now, I tell you, before I said I'd got a trick question at the end. Actually, there are 2 things that I'm quite interested in. One was something that Yanni, who you spoke to, who's my PA, and is actually very bright, and she has lots of ideas, and she said, ask him what are the characteristics of a good opportunity. So you can think about that while you're talking. He keeps on having ideas, but, are they any good? And the other thing I was quite curious in, because when I made the joke about rices and money, is that in this country, and indeed most places outside the US, the basis upon which you and quite a few other people operate just doesn't exist, and that's a royalty basis. And so we're quite curious about how do you get people to pay you on a royalty basis? It's very difficult to get people to pay you anything here.
Well, people, I coach a lot of copy cubs, so a lot of young people who are just getting started in the business, and they say, well, how do I find a client? We show them, many, many ways that they can do that. And then the next thing they want to know is, how can I increase my income? And the answer to that one is simple. You write big winners and then become unavailable. And you don't have to raise your rates. Your clients will do it for you. Now, if you tell somebody you don't have an opening to write for them until the middle of next year because you're booked up with other clients, all of a sudden, if they know,
what you can do.
If they know what you can do, they're going to be perfectly willing to pay more for your work. The next step in that process then really is once your fees get to a certain level, to give your customers a choice, to give your clients a choice. I've done this. Gary Bencivenga did this. Jim Rutz did this. I think we were probably the first 3 to begin working on royalties in this country. And basically the offer was simple. Yes, I'll write a promotion for your health newsletter or your investment newsletter or your magazine or whatever the product was. And I want to give you a choice. I'll do it for a flat fee of $50,000, or you can pay me $10,000 but give me $30 for every 1,000 pieces you mail. And in almost every case, faced with that choice, I can cut a check right now for $50,000, or I can cut a check right now for $10,000, and only pay the balance if this guy really blows the doors off what I'm doing now. Faced with that choice, our clients have consistently, in almost every case, opted to pay the royalties. There's a principle here, Drayton, and you and I have chatted about this too, that the best time, the time at which the client is the most unsuspecting, is the point at which, and the most skeptical, is the point at which he's hiring you. So if I walk into a company here on Main Street, which I suggest my copy cubs do quite often, if you can't find clients, just walk into a store on Main Street and say something like, how come there aren't any other people in your store? And they'll come up with some number of reasons, and then you'll say, well, would you like to fix that? And, of course, they will say yes. And you'll say, well, what if I could fix it for you? Would you be willing to retain me to do that? And well, if you could, yeah. What if it didn't cost you anything? What if I would do all this work for free and only charge you a portion of what I make for you in terms of increased sales and profits? It really, when you think about it, it's a path of least resistance. And
it's
really
very funny. No, it's very, very funny. When I got my first big job 40 odd years ago, and we were arguing about how much I should get paid, I pretty much said the same thing. I said, look, if it doesn't work, throw me out after a month,
That's
and I've
right.
often suggested that to people. I've said, when you're trying to get a job going, and say, throw me out after a month. I'll work for nothing if it doesn't work. What can you do? Very interesting. Of course, everything in life is so much more simple than one imagines very often. Anyhow, let's go on to a few of the little questions I asked you, which you're all familiar with. I think everybody here has had these questions asked them, but they're still important questions. My first question was, what was your biggest success? What do you consider your biggest success?
Well, there are a few that I'm kind of proud of. Drayton, you and I really travel in very different circles. In fact, I was telling Wendy this morning, when I'm talking to Drayton, I feel like the world's a tuxedo and I'm a pair of brown shoes.
Because you haven't seen me.
But while you're working with these billion-dollar corporations, I've always worked with young, much smaller companies, and they tend to be the ones that I've chosen to work with are companies, of course, that I felt had explosive growth potential because I'm working for a piece of sales. I'm working on royalties. So the companies I work with are typically tiny, 10, 20, 30, $40 million a year companies, and I enjoy they're aggressive, they're fleet-footed, there's no bureaucracy, there are no bean counters to slow you down, there are no politics, there's no bullshit. At the end of the month, you're either a hero or a villain. You look at the numbers, and either you were great or you were terrible, and you're not judged on how snappy a dresser you are or how well you schmooze the boss. It's the numbers and the numbers only. And so that's my preamble, just to apologize for some of the following numbers.
No.
These were small companies to start with. But back in the 80s, very early 80s, there was a small coin company in Minnesota. They sold rare coins, and they were just selling them to collectors, and they did about $350,000 a month in sales. And I asked the guy if I could I saw his monthly promotions. I asked the owner of the company if I could please write his promotion for January and February, and I wouldn't even charge him for them. And the reason I said that was because his promotions absolutely sucked. And it was almost like I felt like a heroin dealer, offering free candy to a little child or something. I knew that once he saw what good marketing would do on his file, that I could write my own ticket with this guy. And so he was doing about $350,000 a month. Well, in his very first month using my sales copy, we jumped it to $3.5 million. So it was a 10-time increase in 30 days. And long story short, by the end of the year, we were doing $16 million a month. And it was just same product line, but we positioned it differently. Instead of just talking to coin nerds about the numismatic thrill of owning a rare coin, I sat there and I looked at it and I said, you know what? If this coin could talk, what would it say? And that coin was an old 1860s vintage Morgan silver dollar. Mm-hmm. And immediately it conjured up very vivid images in my mind of Wells Fargo stages being robbed by desperados and saloons with floozies and honky-tonk pianos and cowboys playing poker, and these coins were in the middle of the table. And I wondered if maybe Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday had some of these in their pockets when they had the gunfight at the OK Corral. And so instead of selling this cold kind of clinical, well, the mintage is very small because of this, and it was minted at the Philadelphia Mint, all of a sudden I was selling a piece of my client's history. Something that he had grown up watching Gunsmoke and John Wayne movies, and now I had something that was far greater than the sum of its parts. And so that positioning really was responsible for that growth. And there were a couple of other companies like that I did the same kinds of things, but what I'm really most excited about right now is that back in 2003, I really had my first foray into online marketing, and I was promoting an investment advisory product for a client, and in 6 weeks we sold about $5 million worth of this product, and that was my online record until this year. And like you, Drayton, your past wins are great, but it's good to still be in the game and know that you can still do it. This year in April we launched a campaign with that same client, and his file is actually smaller. His customer file is actually smaller because for the last 4 years I haven't been working with him on acquisition on the front end. He's had some shrinking there. But anyway, we did $7 million in just under 6 weeks in our April-May campaign, and then in August we launched our second campaign of the year, and we did $10 million in sales.
My God!
And right now we're beginning a new campaign that'll run through the rest of the year, and I'm hoping it'll even be bigger. So,
amazing.
Those are a few of the things.
Amazing. Amazing. And so, what do you think is the characteristic in you? Do you think there's something innate in you that enables you to see what other people don't see?
No, actually, I kind of feel like a dullard in that area. I try to compartmentalize and simplify things and keep things simple. When I'm approaching campaigns, especially like these, I try to begin by saying, what really is the thing that this product brings to someone's life? Why would anyone want to buy this? Why would anyone want to have this in their home? Instead of buying this product, they could put $100 or $1,000 or whatever the product price is into a retirement account or an investment account and maybe retire early. They could spend it on their child's education. There are so many other things they could spend money on. So why in the world would anybody want to buy this coin or this investment service or this health newsletter or this bottle of supplements? And the more you think about that, you mentioned this yesterday, the more you think about that, it's just common sense from your prospect's viewpoint. The
bloody hard, though, isn't it? Do you find it easy? You see, when I read about you, you make it sound easy. Is it easy?
Wow, that's a hard question. The question's hard. I think in most cases it really is. It sometimes takes getting over yourself and getting over the product. You know, in the old days, all the masters wrote about, the big breakthrough was don't write about product features, write about benefits. Mm-hmm. And then the next breakthrough was, positioning. Don't just worry about the benefits, worry about how your product is perceived on that golden ladder in your prospect's mind. That was the Al Rees and Jack Trout approach. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then it was, what I've done is I've tried to take it to the next step, which is the dominant emotion or resonant emotion approach, which is not only what is the benefit, not only how do I want to position that product, but what is my customer thinking and feeling right now that will help me make this sale? And I think there's a lot of common sense involved. The hard part is the discipline to focus on that instead of on all of the other distractions that come along with an assignment. So
how long does it take you to do? I mean, this is a silly question in a way, but generally speaking, how long does it take you from the moment that somebody gives you a project to the point where you can actually you may not have delivered it, exactly finished it, but you've pretty much finished it. This is it. All you're doing is tidying up loose ends.
Well, again, a little disclaimer here. I tend to specialize in the writing for the investment markets and also for the health markets. So,
yes, I know.
And so I don't have a learning curve at the beginning of each job. I know my market very well, and I learn more about the market with every promotion we do every month. So I don't have that learning curve to go through. I don't have a long learning curve to find out, what's worked in the past in this market, what's working currently, what my competitors. I don't have any of that, so I can just sit down and start writing. I
understand.
It just took me 4 days to do a 16-page landing page, the first draft of a 16-page landing page for this new financial product that we'll be launching next week. And I would suppose that I'll probably spend another 4 days on it, 2 days this weekend, and then Monday and Tuesday next week, polishing it. So that's on a web page. On a direct mail piece, a 24-page magalog, I'd probably take a couple of weeks.
So let's go on to, we'll forget about that's really interesting. We'll forget about how do you recognize a good idea. We'll get back to you on that one. What's the biggest mistake you've made?
As a copywriter, and marketing consultant, my biggest mistake really was sticking around too long with a client that was self-destructive. Once you've been doing this as long as I have, I'm pretty old too, Drayton. You'll have seen this cycle run. Excuse me, many times. You go to work for a client. He's desperate to have you work for him. You dive in. You give it everything you have. The company begins growing. Before you know it, you've doubled the revenues. Then you've tripled them. Then you've quadrupled them. The client is now making money hand over fist. His staff has grown from maybe 35 people to 350 people. Now, all of a sudden, that client is the smartest human being on earth.
That ever lived.
Yes. And
you have nothing to do with it.
That's right. And then the second thing that happens is he hires a bunch of other very smart human beings that are almost as smart as him, as his new CEO, his new accountant, his new chief financial officer, his new marketing director, all of these people to accommodate the work. And before you know it, all of these incredibly smart people are killing the company. And you go through this process. There's an ownership process here. I built this company. This is my baby, and they're killing it. And so you go through this emotional process of fighting for the life of this company, and that can go on for years. And I've literally lost millions of dollars by sticking around when I should have just said, well, obviously you people are just way too smart for me. I think you're fine on your own. I'll move down the road.
We all want to say that. We all want to say that. That reminds me of my latest dictum, which I came a few weeks ago, which is very obvious, is now that nothing fails like success. I've decided.
Yeah, right.
This is applies in almost all cases. What do you think your best quality is?
I'd have to say optimism and persistence. I find negative people insufferable, and if I didn't wake up in the morning believing that today was going to be better than yesterday and next year is going to be better than the year before, I don't think I'd have the energy to get out of bed. And that kind of feeds into the other one, persistence, which is, there will be times when things are not going well, and those are the times when sticking with it and working through it, even if you wind up failing, and really especially if you wind up failing, that persistence buys you more than just about anything else could. The things that you learn when you work through problems, when you work through tough times, and the character it builds is really what it takes to get you through life.
That is astonishingly good advice. And there's a quote that I think I'm always quoting people, as you know, so I don't have any of my own ideas, but I've got plenty of other people. And I quoted Winston Churchill to you when we were talking yesterday, who said that courage was the greatest of all virtues, for it ensures all others. And he also said that courage is the ability to go from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm.
I love that.
And I can tell you, I'm good at that, the failure bit, and I keep on going because I can't think of anything else to do. Who did you learn most from?
Well, I was really lucky. Years ago, I was in the television industry, and we had a recession in this country back in 1973. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't able to find work. I was living in Los Angeles, working in Hollywood, and I wasn't able to find work. And but I was doing a lot of writing for the films I was doing, and I saw an ad for a small agency that wanted a copywriter, and I was desperate. My wife was pregnant with our second child, and times were tough. And so I went over and I applied for the job, and I got it. And there was a guy there named Mike Engler, and my first day at work, he walked in with his stack of books, and he plunked them on my desk, and he says, "Don't come back into work until you've read all of these books and can answer any question I ask you of them." And the books were the masters. He had Hopkins and Caples and Ogilvy and Dick Schwab and I just pored over those books, and they made instant sense to me, because after all they were saying was just common sense. They were beautiful, and I wish I could be half as eloquent in presenting the concepts and the principles of sales and direct response marketing as those men are, and as you are usually, Drayton. But the bottom line is that's what got me started, and then as I actually started writing, really, I have to say Gary Bencivenga. Gary has become a good friend. He's also an Ogilvy refugee. At the time, I was reading Gary's promotions. He had already worked for Ogilvy, and he'd worked with Dan Rosenthal, and now he was freelancing on his own, and I read everything that guy wrote. I couldn't afford to, but I subscribed to all of the publications that he sold subscriptions for, just so I could read Gary's copy.
Do you know what a small world it is? Well, last time I was in New York, I've got a daughter in New Jersey. I go over there a lot. In fact, I'm going there in a week. I had lunch with Stan Winston. Stan Winston was Gary Bencivenga's boss at Ogilvy.
Is that right?
He was the creative director. And of course, I wrote to Gary before I wrote to you, and Gary said, "Hey, I know you. I've read your book. Wonderful." He wrote me a most wonderful testimonial, actually. I didn't even have to pay him.
Gary is a prince among men and one of the nicest people you'll ever meet, and absolutely just wicked brilliant.
Very, very wonderful writer.
Yeah.
Some idiot client asked me a question the other day about, wasn't the copy a little too long? And I said, well, there's a chap I know called Bensi Vangu who wrote a landing page 63 pages long to sell something that cost $5,000. And as far as I can make out, he must have made at least $1 million and probably a great deal more. And you feel like saying, shut up. This point about reading books and studying just astounds me. I go around the world, and for years I used to ask audiences, how many books on advertising have you read? How many? And you'd get 100 people, 5 or 6 people put their hands up, and I'd think, what are you doing here? Why do you want to spend the rest of your life learning things which other people can tell you over a weekend if you sit down and read them? Anyhow, I better shut up there. We're talking about you.
No, Drake. let me just say amen to that. A year ago, I held a power marketing summit in Washington, D.C., and it was $5,000 for a seat to sit there for 3 days to listen to me ramble on. And one of the first things I asked the audience was, how many of you have read scientific advertising? And about 3 hands came up. Now, these people will pay $5,000 a seat to listen to me talk, but $29 and a day or two of their time to read Caples or Hopkins, they're not doing it. And I think it's absolutely, a sacrilege.
It's beyond belief, isn't it?
Yes.
So go on, tell me what's your worst quality.
Lack of it.
Yeah, we've only got about 40 minutes. So
yeah, I could. Well, I should have Wendy answer this one. She could give you a really long laundry list. Lack of attention to detail, I think. I'm more of a big idea guy. And
don't bore me with the fact that I forgot to put an order form in.
Yeah.
And I got the product name wrong. It's a brilliant idea. Leave me alone.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, we understand that one.
That's why God invented proofreaders, right? So I think that's... I'm sorry, Drayton. I think that's my worst one. I think also I'm a workaholic. I think I put in way too many hours.
You are.
Here,
me too.
Yeah.
I can't think of any other way of making money. I've tried everything else. So what are the biggest mistakes that you see in marketing?
First of all, I think, in our area in direct marketing, most of the stuff we see is fairly good simply because by the time we see it, it's already been mailed several times or it's been online for a while, and it's working fairly well. The biggest mistakes I see in general advertising, of course, we could all do reams on that, but advertising as entertainment, forgetting to mention the product, forgetting to create a desire for the product. I mean, in general advertising, those are the problems, and it drives me batty. I mean, I think you move in these circles of these big, huge, international, multi-billion-dollar companies, and they have these hard-nosed CEOs who are running them. They all graduated from these, they're all Rhodes Scholars or whatever, and they demand a positive ROI, positive return on investment, and they demand efficiency in every division of their company except advertising. And in advertising, they're willing to throw tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars at a bunch of frogs on lily pads, to sell Budweiser beer, and never really have any idea if that expenditure sold one extra bottle of beer or not.
Do you know what's astounding about this? Is that this is the advertising and marketing industry is going backwards, and I say this because I've been around for a long time, but because I know a few people who've been around for even longer than I have, and I was talking about 5 years ago to an old friend of mine called Gene Griffin, who was one of the pioneers of the mail order business back in the 40s, and he also ran an agency. And we were talking to him. I was talking about his clients, and we were having a good moan about clients, as one does. And he said, I said, "What's the most difficult client you ever worked for?" He said, "Charlie Revson." He said, "I'm the only person, as far as I'm aware, that worked twice for Charlie Revson, the founder of Revlon." And so I said, "Tell me what he was like. What was he like, apart from being a ball breaker, giving people ulcers, He said, "They used to carry people out in stretchers, kid." But I came back for more. So I said, "What?" He said he used to test everything. He used to test price. Mm-hmm. And if you go back to, back to the 1900s and you ask what the early advertisers were doing, they were busy testing everything.
Yeah.
And it just is astonishing. And I think it's one of the curses of wealth. I think that the minute you start doing well, you start getting careless. You think you don't need to test, and you do the most amazingly stupid things. But yes, that to me is the big mistake in marketing. Anyhow, what else?
Yes.
What else do you think?
Well, I think these two really go to the two that we've just talked about really go together. The number one is really how to say it? What you said about advertising going backwards. You can go back to the 1930s and read Caples, and he'll talk to you about the importance of testing, the importance of presenting benefits, the importance of asking for the sale, the importance of positioning your product in a unique way that the competition either can't or won't use. The Schlitz beer ads are a great example of that. And you read this, and then you look at what's on television now and what's in magazines, and these are the heirs of Hopkins, these are the heirs of Ogilvy and Schwab, and they've completely forgotten. It's evolution in reverse.
Do you know why? I think that everybody who comes into this business thinks that it started the day before they arrive, and that nobody ever knew anything.
Yep.
Yeah,
and I think testing is another issue, really. I think, they get away with it because, except in very extreme cases, they really don't know. It is very difficult if there's no direct response at the end of the ad. It's very difficult to know whether the ad helped or hurt. And so people are judged on the basis of creativity rather than results. We could talk for hours about the fact that, you run a commercial campaign, your sales go up. And, of course, the people who did the campaign will take credit, but maybe there was a heat wave in Texas, and that's why you sold more Coke. Or maybe Pepsi ran worse commercials than you did. So, you don't really know unless there's a direct response. So because they can get away with it, they do get away with it. The other side of it, though, for us in direct marketing, you're right, on the testing side, we have, both in direct mail and on the web, we have the perfect opportunity to find out exactly, what will work best for us. And I just wrote about really the founding of direct response marketing with Aaron Ward, who started the Montgomery Ward catalog back in the 1800s. And it was beautiful because, all he wanted to do was just help farmers buy things cheaper, because he was a dry goods salesman. He saw how stores were gouging people. So he just did this little flyer, and he put about 100 products on it, just the name of the product and the price, and he sent it out, and it cost about $25,000 in today's money. He sent it out to farmers in the Midwest, and all of a sudden, all this money starts rolling in. And only then did it occur to him, that he had a way to turn advertising from a cost center into an investment. And over the years that followed, he tested everything. And until he stopped working, he wrote all the copy for the Montgomery Ward catalog. And every time he went out, he would test something else. And yet, we have none of my clients test price enough. None of them test headlines enough. None of them test offers enough. And so I think in our area that's probably the greatest sin.
Actually, I've just had lunch with a client who'll test everything. He was saying to me, maybe I test too many things, but all I can say is that years ago at a conference, somebody asked me to define the perfect client in 3 words, which is quite a question. So I thought for a minute, and I said, willingness to test.
Yes.
So tell me now, we got a bit of one. Where does the name Makepeace come from?
I was hoping you could tell me, Drayton. It's an Old English name. The family has all kinds of stories, some of which have proven to be quite specious. So you're really the illegitimate great-grandson of William Makepeace Thackeray? Yeah, I don't know, but explain why that's his middle name, you know.
It must be a Puritan name.
I do know that one of my ancestors was burned at the stake by Bloody Mary. In that case, it's definitely when I lure you over here, which I've got to do, I'll take you to a pub down on the river, about 4 miles from my office, which is next to where the people sail from in the Mayflower. They've got a list of all the people who are on it. I don't know if there are any Makepeaces. But I can tell you, not many of them survived. No, the Makepeaces actually were here to greet the Mayflower when it arrived. We found a guy named William Makepeace and his son John, who arrived 2 years before the Mayflower and set up a trading post around the area that's Boston now. And there's still a lot of Makepeaces in Boston.
So the next question, which always really close to my heart, have you ever despaired?
Yes. Yeah, sure. Everyone has. And, my father was a Methodist minister, and he never made more than $600 a month in his life. And so we were very, very poor growing up. And from my earliest days, I just remember wanting things, wanting something better. And for me, a high sport on a Saturday was just thumbing through the Montgomery Ward catalog or driving around town and looking at the rich people's houses. And so I've always been highly driven to do well. And I need a sense of momentum under me, or I begin to despair. But there have been a couple of times in my life when I felt like I had been hit by a Mack truck. I'd given it everything I had, and I was, utterly defeated. I think it happens to everybody. But, the key at times like that, my mom was a very wise woman. My dad was a maniac, but my mom was very, very wise. And one of her favorite sayings was, "This too shall pass." And
something? That's a real coincidence, because one of my friends is a man called Ken Roman, who used to be the chief executive of the Ogilvy Group, and I still see him. In fact, I mentioned him to you yesterday. And when I was going through a difficult period, because I have an uncanny ability to get myself into difficult periods, that's what he said. He said, "Remember, Drayton, this too shall pass."
It's gotten me through so much. I was in California. I'd been offered a job as a film editor at Universal Studios. And when I got there, I found that I couldn't get into the union because they were going through affirmative action hiring practices. I wasn't a minority, therefore I couldn't get a union card. And so there I was, and my wife was pregnant, and I was in horrible, horrible shape. I had almost no money. And so I got in my car, bought a local newspaper, and went out just to look for any kind of job I could find. Obviously, this is before I discovered direct marketing. I was staying with a friend, and I got in my car, I began driving down the street, and I hadn't gotten 30 feet before the front strut on that Volkswagen broke. And so there I sat in this broken-down car, and I've never been lower in my life than at that moment. And I think it's like dealing with death. You have to give yourself a moment to grieve, or maybe a day, or maybe a week. I have a friend, Carline Cole, who's one of my copy cubs who now.
Oh yes, I've seen pictures of her.
Yeah, she now makes about $800,000 or $900,000 a year as a copywriter. She's great, and just love her to death. And but Carline, when she writes a package, a promotion, and it doesn't work, she'll call me up and scream into the phone, "I suck," and then she's crying, And the same thing happens every time. I say, okay, that's it's time to go shopping. Just give it up for the day. Go to the mall, grab your mom, go to the mall, and spend more money than you should, and then come back to work tomorrow and be ready to do it all over again. So just knowing that whatever state you're in is temporary is enough to get you through a lot of the tough times.
On what basis do you operate? I mean, because of course I've never been there. You have a building. What's the physical structure of your business?
For years, of course, for most of my 35 years in this business, I worked out of my home. But in the last couple of years, we started the Profit Center and the Total Package to help young writers and marketers get a start. And that's required employees. So yes, we have a small building here in the mountains of Waynesville, North Carolina, and about 5,000 square feet, and we have 10 employees, and we're in the process now and we have eight empty offices, which we're in the process of trying to fill. And we have a full-on web department, 4 guys that can do work pretty much any miracle online in terms of designing websites and all the bells and whistles, the flash, the videos, the streaming audio, all of that. And then I have 2 copy cubs that work with me full time, and so that's basically it.
You must have one of the most profitable business per pro rata in the world, especially since you're selling something that requires bloody hard work. What was I going to ask you? What are your favourite books outside Bob Marking? What do you read apart from stuff to do with business?
My passions really are politics, history, and quantum physics. I'd have to say quantum physics and string theory, cosmology, that kind of stuff, is really what fascinates me the most. Years ago, I read about something called the dual slit experiment, which showed that a photon, a particle of light, behaves like a particle if you have one slit on a card open. If you open 2, it acts like a wave, and if you observe it doing this, it'll go back to acting like a particle. And I'm going, holy cow, something's going on here. And so I started reading on quantum physics and string theory, and to me, this is the new religion. Obviously, you talk about religion, you risk hurting someone's feelings or offending somebody, but I spent most of my life being very religious. But the mysteries that are being exposed in those areas are just riveting and fascinating. I also love history. We just moved to the small town in Appalachia, Waynesville, North Carolina, and this part of the world is known for hillbillies and moonshine, and this is where stock car racing got started and that kind of thing. And the people here don't really have a sense of their history, and I started reading up on it, and what I found has been really fascinating, and so those are my real passions when I'm reading for fun.
When you do you watch television much or not?
Maybe an hour a day, maybe. I turn on to fall asleep at night, and I tend to watch we call it the Hitler channel. It's the History Channel.
Oh yeah, I was writing. Do you know something? 10 minutes before I got on the phone to talk to you, I was writing something for somebody about the History Channel. Because I'm also a history maniac, but I tell you what, you've lost me when you start talking about photons, man.
Well, I love history, and the History Channel is great, but
very simplistic.
Yeah, Discovery Channel, History Channel, Science Channel, a lot of it's very simple, and of course, half the programming's about Hitler, and then at least a third of it's about Bigfoot, the Loch Ness monster. So, you know.
Yeah, it should be changed to myth and legend.
Yeah.
No, I don't watch television very much. And in terms of reading outside, other than books, then what else do you read?
I read the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal every day because most of my work for clients is in the financial area, but also just because once you get addicted to this investment thing, it's like having football season 12 months a year because it's like watching a sport. It's fascinating. Plus, you can have your own money in it, which is great. You know.
No, I remember you saying something about. You wrote something saying if you want to learn about it, invest yourself, and you'll learn an amazing amount very, very quickly.
Oh yeah, I had failure after failure after failure for years trying to write in the financial markets, and then one day I opened my own brokerage account, and I put more money in it than I could afford to lose. And all of a sudden, I went from going bored to tears with the subject to being fascinated with it.
Oh, so you think one of the secrets of success is to lay your own balls on the line, is it?
I think becoming passionate about your product is really a key. You know, in the health field, we actually launched the entire health newsletter industry here in the United States with a newsletter called Health and Healing. At the time, my wife, Wendy, was marketing director for Phillips Publishing, and her group was launching this newsletter, and I was hired to write the launch promotion. And since the product didn't exist, we basically got to create it on paper. And so at that time, I couldn't have been less interested in alternate health and vitamins and all of that other kind of stuff. And but after a day of reading some of the more passionate authors on the subject of the horrible things that the medical industry does to people, I was ready to take up arms and storm the ramparts. So it really developing a passion for what you're writing about, I think, is extremely important.
There's a man over here called who writes about the medical profession who is a doctor and who always says, that doctors kill more people than disease ever does. But that's another subject.
In Israel, when doctors went on strike, the national death rate plummeted.
Now, I was going to ask you right at the very beginning, what are the characteristics of a good opportunity, do you think? The characteristics of a good opportunity or a good product idea?
I've been told that I'm a great instinctive marketer. I tend not to think my way through those kinds of calls. I tend to feel my way through them. And so I guess my answer would be my first reaction to the product, if it's that this is something that I want, this is something I can't live without, or this is something that that fascinates me or intrigues me in some way, like, for example, the coins that we were talking about earlier. When I was told that this guy marketed coins, I was almost suicidal. I can't market coins, But then I went in and they're dull, they're boring. It's like stamp collecting. It's like, you have to be incredibly obsessive compulsive to even be in this hobby. Those were my prejudices going in, right? But then when I actually saw one, all of that changed. And
very
there was
interesting.
Yeah.
The man I mentioned to you before, Gene Griffin, was in the coin business, but as a hobby, and he tried to get me involved in it. I just couldn't. I mean, I have had to sell coins for people like the British Mint, British Royal Mint, but I confess to be something of an ignoramus.
We did huge business with the British Royal Mint. We sold so many sovereigns, it was just amazing.
Well, you take consolation is that you were probably improving my crappy copy. Actually, to be honest, I didn't write very much for them. One day I'll tell you a wonderful story about how I got drunk as a result of the Royal Mint and made a fool of myself. I met Prince Philip.
Oh, really?
Sorry, it's a very funny story. Actually, I'll end this First of all, I'd like to thank you very much, and then I'll tell you, everyone, this funny story, which is absolutely true. When I think of the moments that have embarrassed me most, one was the day of the 1500th anniversary of the Royal Mint, and they had a big do. They'd been clients of mine for quite a while. The Duke of Edinburgh came round and did what the Duke of Edinburgh always has to do, very politely bends over. So what do you do? And I said, I do the advertising. He said, who do you work with? And I said, Ogilvy and Mather. He said, I know David Ogilvy. He said, we're on the board of the World Wildlife Fund. I said, well, funnily enough, I'm going to his 75th birthday party tonight. So he said, give him my best regards, and happy birthday. So as usual, being an excessive individual, I had another 3 glasses of wine, tottered off to the boat where we were having this party, well prepared, so to speak. And at the moment when I'd had 3 more drinks, decided it was a good time to stand up and say, "Oh, the Duke of Edinburgh Society," he said, God, did I feel a bloody fool. And on many other occasions I might have. But anyhow, thank you very much, Clayton.
It's been fun.
And for anybody who's listening to this who doesn't already subscribe to Clayton's Easy Writers organisation, club, religion, we've decided it's a religion. You should check it out. And Clayton and I are now going to stop, and then we're going to start again in a minute. And none of you will hear it because we're talking about something we're cooking up together, which may or may not come off, but I hope it will, and which a very, very few people will be able to attend. And this is a foretaste of what you can get from Clayton. What you can get from me is not worth talking about because this man is remarkable.
Thank you, Drayton.